Home prices in the valley are rocketing past record highs. Limited housing inventory and a surge in demand have driven the price boom for more than a year. But is a cool down coming? I spoke today with the president of the Greater Palm Springs Realtors, formerly the Palm Springs Regional Association of Realtors, James Ronald Whitney. James, first off, tell us what you're seeing in terms of real estate in the Coachella Valley.
Wow, that's a very broad question, but real estate is doing incredibly well here in Greater Palm Springs. The median detached home price is up 32% from last year at $580,000. And for 11 straight months, the median price of attached homes has gone up and reached $360,000 at the end of last month, compared to $290,000 just a year ago. That's a 24% increase. And all of the 9 Greater Palm Springs cities have actually had increases, and they've ranged from 41.8%, I think that was it, in Rancho Mirage, to just over 8% in the city of Coachella. So in total home sales over the last 3 months, we've hit all-time highs, averaging about 1,300 sales per month. 2/3 of those have been in single-family residences, and 1/3 have been in attached homes like condos and townhouses. And in June 1st, 2020, we had about 2,800 properties for sale. At the beginning of this month, June 1st, just 1 year later, we have 682 properties. So obviously, as the tenets of supply and demand dictate, housing prices have unfortunately increased.
So the big question, James, why is this happening?
There's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of trends. There's sort of a cool down right now. Would you like me to address the trends or why it's sort of cooling down?
I'm sure the pandemic had a lot to do with it, but I'm curious now that the pandemic is coming to an end, is that why we are seeing a cool down?
Well, home sales moderated in May because of buyer fatigue. It began setting in. A lot of potential buyers, they're sort of just taking a break and hoping to see more listings as the economy reopens. And sellers who did not want to list their properties or show them during COVID, they're now finally starting to list their homes. And that lack of housing inventory has continued to push the prices up, as well as modestly, just a little bit higher interest rates. However, the 30-year fixed mortgage interest rate averaged just under 3%. I think it was 2.96% in May, down from 3.23% in May of 2020, according to Freddie Mac. Also, increased competition, like multiple offers, selling above the list price, all cash offers, those kinds of things, and declining affordability have caused some buyers to become a little bit discouraged. But new listings are on the rise, which should help to sustain a high level of home sales as we head further and further into the summer, hopefully without this heat wave, due to that much needed inventory. And as not to bury the lead, at the beginning of this month, we had fewer than 700 units for sale. Last year at this time, we had almost 2,800. Obviously, again, those tenets of supply and demand have driven prices in a northern direction. But we do feel that inventory is going to increase going forward because sellers will get a nice return on their investment. And now that the COVID scare is less in the spotlight and hopefully nearing its curtain call, previously hesitant sellers are now more amenable to allowing private showings and open houses. And in Palm Springs, just as one example, the restrictions have formally all been lifted now that California reopened last Tuesday on the 15th. So to be specific, at the current rate of housing sales, if we had no new listings whatsoever, our housing inventory would be depleted completely in just 18 days. A year ago, that depletion would have taken about 4 months. And the average days on market was more than 50 a year ago. Today, we'd be able to sell your property on average in less than a month. And in fact, the housing prices over the last 90 days, when looking at the median number, they're selling on average right at their list price. And I don't think that—
Has housing supply always been an issue in the Coachella Valley, or is this more exposed now because of the pandemic?
No, it's really more exposed now because of the pandemic. And I mean, if you think about it, sellers or potential sellers, they did not want people, walking into their homes and touching things and, breathing when it's airborne. They didn't want them breathing in their homes only to leave, come back in and possibly be exposed. So you had a lot of people that wanted to take advantage of, these nice prices that they would get on their investments by selling them, but they weren't willing to, that risk reward, they weren't willing to risk their health over some profits. So that's why this is an anomaly. But I do feel that's going to change because, the COVID scare is certainly coming to an end.
We're seeing a lot of businesses and restaurants, for example, struggling to find workers. And I'm curious, do you think that the rising home prices are part of that, trying to get people who, want affordable housing to move here?
They haven't been driven out of Palm Springs as much as they have the major, metropolitan areas, which is why we're seeing a lot of the people that, they're from Los Angeles and Seattle, Vancouver, Portland. There's a lot of those people who are now coming here because, they did work in the restaurant industry or they were bartenders. And now that they don't have jobs, they can't afford those rents, but we're much more affordable here in the greater Palm Springs area. Many people who have always enjoyed vacationing in the 9 cities throughout Greater Palm Springs have come to the realization that the new normal will be working remotely and that they can live anywhere. So Palm Springs and the surrounding cities represent resort cosmopolitan living with far less traffic and far more affordable housing prices than the cities from which the buyers come. So there's so many restaurants per capita. For example, here in the greater Palm Springs area, these people from major metropolitan cities, they can come here. And over the past year, those, let's call them city folk, they've been migrating to greater Palm Springs in droves, and total housing sales have surged from a monthly average of just over 700 sold homes to more than 1,100. And because they had their sort of favorite places to vacation, like Palm Springs, which was known as the playground of the rich and famous, it's not surprising that the record-setting housing prices throughout Greater Palm Springs are most prominent in these resort cities. And those are the ones with a lot of the restaurants and bars, and a bit less impressive in the residential areas because they're not going to have that kind of work there. Also, because our buyers are coming from these major metropolitan cities, they boast higher incomes, deeper pockets, at least percentage-wise. So sales of homes under $300,000 remain lower than sales of multi-million-dollar homes, which are currently averaging 200 units per month. And I don't think we've ever had anything like that.
Are you seeing a lot of people looking to buy investment properties?
Yeah, I think we'll always have that, especially with Modernism Week, Desert X, the Palm Springs International Film Festival, just to name a few. Visitors from all around the world, they can't help but recognize the tremendous value once they get here and the investment opportunity here in Greater Palm Springs. Buying an investment property, it would afford them an opportunity to make a boatload of money by renting it out, because Greater Palm Springs is known worldwide. And it also affords them the opportunity to enjoy the property personally when it's not being rented out. And as long as there's inventory and reasonable interest rates, and they're incredibly reasonable right now, and as long as we have programs like The Bachelorette and Real Housewives of Beverly Hills who use our cities as their prized location settings, I can assure you there will always be a high demand for investment properties here in the Greater Palm Springs area.
All right. James, we appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, Peter. Nice to be here.